The RBA won't stop the housing boom. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your Stein or your morning coffee and let's have a look at a couple of articles discussing the housing boom and how, well, the RBA will not intervene. I can't imagine any of us who've been following the news cycle, or particularly what the RBA is saying, are going to be too surprised. So this is the article. It's an analysis written by Ian Vanendier, and it was why the RBA is reluctant to stop the housing boom. And people have requested I switch back to the blue text. Let me know what you prefer in the comment, or the blue highlighter. Let me know what you prefer. So let's have a look through parts of this. So first up, the hot housing market, everyone. And we've been talking about this in several videos. There's a lot of stuff coming out there from the media that is, well, one would argue intentional to generate FOMO, but there is an appetite for houses. Perhaps if you were staking your real estate empire on units that were catering to Airbnb people or to international students or to migrants, you might be a little bit upset. But for a lot of people in housing, well, I mean, look at all the guys that are getting in the media with like 100 houses or 20 or 30 houses. They're targeting lower socioeconomic areas where this essentially the government's supporting them. So let's look at this one. So each weekend across the country, they line up for a quick COVID-restricted viewing. They are shuffled in the driveway and from the street, subjected to a toned-down version of the usual spin from agents, whose main task that day is to act as crowd control, marshalling, and fend off requests for a contract. The competition is intense. Young couples nervously eye each other off, would-be rivals in a quest for their slice of the great Australian dream. Now, here's one thing. Notice how they're talking. I'm going to change this to a different color. We'll go light orange. So young couples. Notice how, well, a lot of first home buyers you expect to be younger. I mean, let us know in the comments, guys. How old were you when you got your first house? Or are you still waiting? We saw yesterday in that article about the professional couple that were earning, should be as a family, over 200 grand or 200 grand, trying to get into $1 million house as their first house. I don't understand why they wouldn't. Maybe they were, the product of divorce and coming together later in life and then trying to get in. But then you'd think back in your younger days, you would have got hitched and bought a house, a cheaper one, and then upgraded. Is this just Florian being old-fashioned again? But here's the thing, guys. You've got a few clocks in existence. You've got your biological clock for women in particular, where their ability to procreate gets a lot harder the older they get. For blokes too, guys, we're not super virile and full of energy forever. But also you've got a mortgage clock, perhaps, in such a way that the older you get, there's going to be less productive years you're going to have depending on your career. So it's going to, perhaps, destroy any opportunity the banks even have of lending you money. Oh, we'll give you a loan, but only 20 years. We'll give you a loan, but only 15 years. That really, I haven't seen that mentioned much at all in the media, and it's something we need to just think about. So you've got this little window here. So the longer you save for a deposit, if you're saving for these first few years of a deposit, your window to pay that house is going to shrink, guys. It's going to shrink. So properties listed on Thursday are swamped by inquiries, eager buyers, and bids. Many are sold within days. In most cases, the auction is Dutch style, conducted in secret with minimal transparency. The final price routinely comes in at well above the indicative range and well above buyers' reserves. It's been a bonanza for the 2/3 of households that own a property. Heartache for those desperately trying to get in or get aboard the boom. Now, are we actually seeing... I mean, this is a media image here of people lining up. This was sent to me by a viewer just yesterday. They'd gone to look at a property. There was cars backed up so far that it was a traffic jam recorded on Google. So this is happening, everyone, on the Easter weekend. Oh, happy Easter, everyone, too. I hope you've had a good weekend. One thing that's quite interesting is going to a late night vigil with a whole bunch of toddlers when they're handing candles around. Yeah, it was a little bit stressful. A little bit stressful. So let's have a look at just some property price data. You know, how much they've increased. Because since 1990, Sydney prices of property has risen 565%. Now, refresh my memory. Have our wages gone up 565% since the 90s? I'm sure they have gone up significantly, but wage growth has nowhere. Yeah, it's not been that. You know, 1990. What was 1990? I still remember that. That was, you know, playing NES on the Nintendo. Oh, no, it was. We just moved to Queensland, actually, in 1990. Melbourne, 137 to 846. That's September, so it's gone up since then. 518%. Brisbane, 408%, everyone. Imagine getting into Brisbane for $106,000, guys. I wouldn't mind that at all. 100 grand for a place. Adelaide, 317%. Perth, 405. Good old Canberra, 508%. Hobart now, look at that. The average price is higher than Brisbane at 519. Tasmania is beautiful. It's very cold. I've travelled down there for work. I travelled down there for a university conference, so I probably have some rather rosy memories of it, going around Lonnie drinking bogues to warm up. But I feel sorry for him. Look at that increase. So if you're buying here in the 90s and you just sit on property for 30 years, you know, okay, you're instantly a millionaire. Do you think that took a lot of skill? Could anyone have predicted that? Oh, some people have. Just buy and sit in property. But they're juicing up the market. We're going to talk about that in today's Government to the Rescue piece again. And units. Sydney, 430%. Melbourne, 448%, taking the top rank. What about Brisbane? 328. We are the cheapest? No. Yes. Darwin, not available, no data. But still. And Perth, 375,000 for units. For units, guys, remember you've got all those body corporate costs and all the flammable cladding removal issues too. So let's look at the latest housing data that's just appeared. This is from the December quarter for Domain. Sydney, 1.2. You're only up 6.7. Melbourne, 936. 616 for Brisbane. 574 for Adelaide. 855 for Canberra. 563 for Perth. 564 for Hobart. 533 for Darwin. Nationally, 852. The big boys are Sydney and Melbourne, where they keep, you know, that's the biggest part of our market here in Australia, guys. We have a look here at the core logic, their hedonic index. I don't understand how they can change this on a daily basis, considering just the time it takes for property to process and change hands. But they do, and it's all going up. It's all going up, everyone. Now, government to the rescue. Government intervention is stimulating the market, everyone, and this is what we need to be aware of. Particularly when spruikers tell you, oh, it's going to the moon, it's fantastic times, the economy's, you know, booming, we're in recovery. You've got to remember all of this stuff isn't normal. You know, they're keeping zombie companies alive, everyone. Trading while insolvent provisions mean that our external administrations and personal insolvencies are both at about half of where they have, and they're starting to creep up. We looked at an article a few days ago where people are expecting 5,000 insolvencies over 12 months. And remember, this is about average. That's during normal times. We've just had our first recession in 28 years. So even if we just creep up to normal, it's going to be bad, guys. You've got JobKeeper. Who would have imagined JobKeeper back in the recession Australia had to have? You know, and the thing is, there's now, the LNP have got no leg to stand on to be critical of any spending, any flamboyant new program or spending or MMT rubbish that Labor wants to shill out. Because look at what they've done. Nearly 9% in Victoria was supported on JobKeeper of those employed in the workforce. That's nuts, guys. And I understand why. I understand why they did this policy. My understanding also it was originally a Labor idea years ago, of course. The cynic in me believes it's simply to reduce the burden that's going on to Centrelink and to welfare, and to maintain those relationships with businesses that are still viable. They're going to know, guys, that some of these businesses here are not viable. They're going to know that for sure. And that people are going to be on welfare anyway. What would you rather? Would you rather we have JobKeeper for a period of time so that the chances of businesses continuing remain and people have those relationships, or just dump people all onto welfare? There's the question. But we have to know this is not natural and it's now gone. So, juicing the market. And this seems to be an Australian bloody pastime here, guys. Whenever there's any economic issues, our politicians will just jump in to juice the entire market for property. It's the piñata that they smack to get economic activity coming out. So the RBA cash rate, guys, it's, well, I've got it down here. It's 0.1%. You know, and you know what? Let's have a look at the ASX cash rate predictor. Oh, wait, interest rate prediction. I'll bring this up here, the rate tracker, guys. And we can see, so from April, so 1st of April, decreasing to 0%, 87% prediction, no change, 13%. And the RBA have said they're going to just sit on this rate, the cash rate, for as long as they need to. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully I won't have to update that chart for a while. Remember, 3% used to be the emergency rate, everyone. I was looking at previous videos about housing and intervention, all these things, or previous reports I was reading. 3% were an emergency rate. We can't go any lower. What was it like, guys? Those of you that are older, that actually earned interest that was, you know, where you didn't have to jump through 50 bloody hoops like ING. You know, you got to sign 50 forms, give them a drop of blood every month. You got to jump on your foot just so you get 1.35% interest, and it's only capped at 100 grand. Let me know who you bank with, guys. I've done the what is it, Robo Bank. I've got my bonus intro rate of 175, and now I've shipped all the money out of that. I need to find somewhere else because this is just a joke. You're not even keeping up with inflation now with the cash rate. I mean, that's what they want. They want to incentivize you to spend. The only reason I'm heavy in cash at the moment is because I'm doing a construction project. So I just want to have that cash. If I wasn't, I'd either be decimating the mortgage or I'd probably be throwing it all in a range of boring shares that are not very exciting, but are pretty stable companies that are going to pay me dividends. And to just be stacking up that, not even worrying about the price, and sit on it till I'm an old man. You know, real boring investing. Anyway, back to this. You've got the home builder. Look at home building approvals, guys. They've shot up. We're going to see it go up again in the next data that comes out, because we just had the last, the last instance before you could, you had to sign that contract by the end of the month. So I'm estimating or guesstimating that our building approvals will have taken another jump up because people want to sign that paperwork. First home buyer grants up to 88 grand, guys, when you combine some of the state and federal handouts. It's just ludicrous how much they're giving out. 5% government loan guarantee. We saw one couple in a previous article were quite frustrated. They'd saved, they'd worked they sacrificed, they had friends who took their money out of their super, which is another thing here, and then got the government 5% guarantee and got into a house. Life ain't fair, everyone. The more the government intervenes in the market, it just exacerbates that. Hopefully that can be a valuable lesson to a lot of people out there, and we can realize, try and push the Overton window away to reduce the manipulation of the handouts. We'll see. Negative gearing. Everyone does it. It's a way to mitigate your taxes here in Australia, guys. Makes a lot of sense, honestly. I'm looking at my tax bill going, you know what? I could be negative gearing a big chunk of that on a property. Who cares if you lose some money on it if you're sitting in it long enough? Because what are you going to do? You're going to give it to the government? You're going to give the government your tax? What are they going to do with it? They'll just waste it. And it's a problem. It is a problem. Honestly, when Labor were proposing to ditch negative gearing, I was critical of that because it was taking away an opportunity to offset tax for younger generations. Because they weren't doing it properly. They weren't just going to get rid of it or phase it out for everyone over time. All the boomers were still going to get it, but the younger generations weren't going to get that perk. Which is kind of unfair. This is even another way it's screwing the system for younger people. But it overheats housing. It does two things. It overheats the demand for housing because it's a way to mitigate your tax. And it drives, sucks in investment away from other things. You know, perhaps people would be investing in businesses. Perhaps people would be investing in the stock market. Perhaps people would be investing in assets which are maybe a bit more productive, maybe some farmland. Instead, it puts it in there, and our economic complexity keeps going down. That's the long-term issue that we're seeing here, guys. You know, and what's happening now? You've got generations of people that are struggling to get in the market. You've got an exacerbated class divide here in Australia. And then reducing housing supply, biggest one there was the mortgage holidays, I'd say. Because then you don't have all those properties of people that are leveraged too far. Combined with all of these other support mechanisms, they don't have to sell until September this year. CommBank isn't going to force anyone out. And then just the general uncertainty, and people's bank accounts are flush with money. They've been saving because of the free money flowing out. So you've got to remember, guys, at the moment, we've had our first recession in 28 years, but there's been significant intervention in the market. You know, you've got to keep, they're keeping the zombies alive. And I know there are going to be some people that are annoyed that I'm saying that, but it's true. Some businesses are just not going to make it. They're juicing the market, and they always have, and they just, double down during tough times. I mean, mortgage holidays. Who would have thought these things would have existed, that they would have given people holidays this long on their home loans? I remember we were looking at another article months ago, a professional couple that could only stay in their house because of the mortgage holidays. They had no emergency fund, they had no savings, or if they did, they burned through it. And they leveraged so much. That's why people are hoping, if there's an interest rate correction, if this rate suddenly starts climbing up, up maybe to 5%, that you'll start to see more property supply increase as people flood to the market because they're forced out. Now, we have to think about that, if that will actually happen. Is that just hopium? Because will the RBA intervene for that, for housing, or are they more worried about jobs? And that's what we'll get to later. And think about how many people are buying their own home. They're constantly talking about mortgage stress at 30% of your gross income. What sacrifices would you make to keep in your home? What would you be willing to give up? Is this the big test for a generation? If you've gotten in, you're going to do everything you can to keep it. Maybe just to ride out. If interest rates go higher, what do you think? Will there be political pressure to lower rates if people start losing their homes? Will mortgage keepers suddenly appear? Hey, it's election year, or next year. You don't know what they can do to intervene. We've seen what they're doing now. So this is first home buyer affordability. We've got a Lorenz curve here. Above the line, that means you've got access to that many properties that are considered affordable, less than 30% of your disposable income. Brisbane, at least when this data was out, generally, a lot of the property was affordable. You had access to a lot of it with, 70th percentile. A little bit in Perth. You still earned a bit of money, but if you were down the bottom, you had no chance. 50th. In the middle. To really be up there to be affordable, even that, you're spending more than 30%. So, that's with interest rates then. Haven't changed much. What if they go up? What if you have to spend more? But the question is, what if you've been trained and conditioned to spend a huge amount of your money just to save a deposit plus rent? Maybe you'll still be better off even with your own home and high rates. So, regulators to the sideline. Back to the article written by Ian. Wayne Burns neatly summed up his attitudes this week in two speeches. As the head of the banking regulator, the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, APRA, Mr. Burns said it wasn't his job to ensure housing was affordable. His mandate was to protect the integrity of the banking system. See, they don't care about housing affordability. These regulators, it's not part of their job. Everyone. Whereas the NZ are doing something slightly different. Should it be part of their job? Do you think that would make a difference? And have a shot of coffee while you let me know that answer in the comments. So, Not that those two goals are mutually exclusive. When prices go crazy, as they are at the moment, history tends to show lax lending standards. Both the APRA boss and the Reserve Bank Supremo, Philip Lowe, insist they are keeping a close eye on lending standards and are prepared to take action if things deteriorate. So far, though, neither are inclined to stem the tide. Okay, just because a lot of people are borrowing money, does that mean lending standards are going out the window? I know there's been a whole lot of rigmarole, a whole lot of, well, would you say fear-mongering that the lending standards are loosening and the dumb plebs are just going to borrow so much money? I mean, we've had a first recession in 28 years. Sure, there have been a lot of support mechanisms, but I honestly think in some ways people will... Okay, we're going to have the idiots go on a current affair. The bank lent me too much money. Remember that real estate agent about a year ago? There were all these videos and articles about them who'd borrowed all this money for a mining town in Queensland to buy all these houses, and they blamed the bank. Where is individual responsibility, individual agency? That's where it has to be. Really. We need to advocate for the individual to be responsible, so if they make a stupid mistake, they pay the price. Okay? If you want a housing correction, guys, stupid people have to be burned. Okay? That's it. But the problem is we're in a well, I'd say our culture is averse to lesson through failure. No one wants to experience any failure. No one realizes failure can be one of the most valuable lessons in your life, stuffing something up and building yourself up again. That has to happen, everyone. But don't worry. So, we'll see. We'll see. Unlike previous booms, this is being driven by owner-occupiers and in particular first-home buyers. Investors who swamped the property market a few years back until recently have been in decline, but have sniffed the wind and smelt the prospect of easy capital gains are moving back in. Or maybe they're worried about inflation eating away at the value of their cash. So here you've got owner-occupiers. Boom. Skyrocketed, everyone. First-home buyers and investors are coming back in. What do you think? Look at that climb there. Do you think this is the same? Are first-home buyers as inclined, or owner-occupiers as inclined to sell their property as investors? I would argue not. So the RBA will not stop the housing boom that we're having, everyone. And this is a... Well, let's back to Ian's article before we go to another one about the property boom that shouldn't be. On paper, it shouldn't be happening. For the first time in a century, our population has declined thanks to a low birth rate and the complete absence of immigration. We just emerged from the deepest recession in a century and unemployment remains elevated. Yeah, guys, this is it. It's nuts. It's just crazy. Everyone thought that, well, not everyone, the media, the banks, the RBA, they were all talking about significant property price declines. We had our first recession in 28 years. I tend to think now that a lot of that was done with intention to persuade, shall we say, our political leaders so that they would, well, intervene in the market. Maybe I'm just becoming more and more cynical the older I get. What do you reckon, everyone? Demand for property should be in the doldrums. Add to that, the building industry continued almost uninterrupted during the pandemic, boosted by the federal government's home builder program. Supply should be lifting. Ask any kid who's emerged from their first high school economics lesson and they'll tell you property prices ought to be plunging. Well, it depends. Housing isn't because people want to go in houses. There's also the lockdown factor now, that you may be restricted to stay in your dwelling for a period of time. So there's more demand for housing. Do you think the triangle of fail and all the disasters in apartment buildings, do you think that's also steering people away from apartments to houses? I don't know. I would rather have a dodgy house that you could at least get a hammer and repair things yourself. You know, I've found some dry rot in a wall I'm demolishing here, everyone. And, you know, I'd prop that up with some ag props to keep it going. Still, you can, you know, do it as you need. It's all good. I'm demolishing it. Whereas, you know, I can repair most of the things on my house with a set of hand tools. If you're in an apartment building, you can't really. You know, you need to work with the with the body corporate with the other people. It could be your apartment's fine, but something across the road has some significant damage, or across the complex have significant damage, and you're on the hook for it too. Could that be what's also steering people to apartments? Or is it just my experience to it and the fact that I've been following all this stuff online that's that's clouding my perspective there? So, but all the cheap cash swirling through the system has more than made up for the decline in people. And while underlying housing supply is running hot, for some obscure reason, the stock of housing hitting the market has tumbled. According to CoreLogic, the number of houses being listed for sale has plummeted to record lows, plunging 30% below the 5-year average. I would say that's uncertainty. You're not... I mean, are you going to downsize? What if you wanted to move interstate? Are you going to do all of that with just the uncertainty that's out there at the moment? Or are you going to just stay put? That's what I would argue is happening there. That there's a level of uncertainty out there in the market. There's a level of uncertainty out there just with our individual liberties that we're going to have, that maybe people are waiting and biding their time. With demand-supply dynamics turned on their head, that weight of money will continue to dominate, continuing to add heat to the already hot market. Now, the RBA will not raise rates to slow the housing boom. And this is from an article published on the 10th of March, written by business reporter Michael Jander and Gareth Hutchins in the ABC as well. The same website or same organization that's featuring the piece that Ian wrote. The RBA will not rise rates to slow the housing boom. We've heard that again from Lowe and from other members on the board. Mr. Lowe reiterated that the RBA does not and would not explicitly target house prices with an interest rate policy, which seems funny because you'd think house prices are going to be affected the most by interest rates, but he's not worried about it. Well, it's not his job. He wants to get unemployment up. That's what he's pushing for. So they're thinking flooding the economy with all this free money is how you can achieve that. Just keep it all going. The problem is we're going to see I'd say we're already seeing the manifestation of the Candlelight effect. It refers to the change in relative prices resulting from a change in money supply. The change in relative prices occurs because the change in money supply has a specific flow or specific ejection point and flow path through the economy. Remember, every time you borrow money, that's not money coming from someone else's bank account, everyone. That's money that's created out of nowhere. The bank is allowed to have so many loans outstanding because it's fractionally reserved. And there we go. Money supply is supplying through housing here in Australia, I would argue. And that's why we're seeing a bubble in housing relative to other things. How long can it go? Can it burst? Will it burst in our lifetime? The market can remain... What is it? Oh, I can't even remember the quote now. The market can remain... something while you're in... Anyway, I'll remember it after I finish recording. Let me know the quote I want. The market can remain crazy longer than you can remain solvent. Oh, damn it. It's too early in the morning. Anyway, I recognize... instead, he said it was up to the government and financial regulators to address community concerns about soaring house prices. This is the problem. I recognize that low interest rates are one of the factors contributing to higher housing prices, and that higher and rising house prices raise concerns for many people, he said. But there are also many people that want prices to go up. When you're in the property market, you want your house to be more valuable. You want it to go up. You want to feel like you've made good money. You've made a good investment decision. There are various tools other than higher interest rates to address these concerns, leaving monetary policy to maintain its strong focus on the recovery in the economy and jobs and wages. And well, we've seen the consequence of government's intervention in the market. It's resulting in this bubble. The economic recovery. When it comes to the economy, the news has been unrelentingly good of late. Unemployment is well below what we anticipated late last year, and our growth has recovered much more quickly than expected. Now, here's something I'm going to draw to your attention, guys. We have two methods of measuring unemployment. You've got the ABS methodology and you have the Roy Morgan methodology. Now, Roy Morgan, the rule is you kind of double the unemployment rate to get the Roy Morgan rate. They're sitting at 13.2%, everyone. Their underemployment is 7.8%, combined is 21%. If we go to the ABS, they're telling us the unemployment rate is 5.8%, guys. What do you think is more accurate? 13.2% or 5.8%? Just keep that in mind, everyone, when we're talking about the unemployment rate being so good. There's other data out there. And really, I think you need to combine the unemployment and underemployment rate, the underutilization rate of 21%. That's the one we need to be worried about. The situation remains fragile. On the global front, new COVID strains are emerging. That's expected, guys. That's just normal. That's just normal. Don't worry about it. Vaccine rollouts globally are not occurring as quickly as hoped, and the recovery is at best patchy. Local wages growth is barely registering. Why would wages grow? We've got unemployment. I don't trust the 5.8%. This is why when they're saying unemployment is, 5.8%, we should be seeing wages growth because there's going to be demand for workers. Maybe we should trust the 13.2%. Just saying. Just saying, because, I'm selling a mug with this graph on it here, showing you how many incorrect forecasts the RBA have made about wage growth. So, business investment is weak, and most of the recovery has been driven by federal government stimulus. Yeah, it's just the government juicing up the market, everyone, the economy. From where Philip Lowe sits, it will be years before we can truly say we are out of the woods. That's why he's committing to ultra-cheap interest rates for the next 3 to 4 years. The Reserve Bank wants house prices and the stock market to gradually rise. So, with this in place, with the intervention we have seen, is it smart to get into housing, regardless of if your purchasing power, because of the candle-on effect of your money relative to housing, is just going to get even worse? Or should you go into other things? Can you see the government pulling out Mortgage Keeper? Asset price gains deliver greater wealth and boost confidence, which then feeds into improving spending and sustainable growth. That's why he's been talking down suggestions of a housing price bubble. He'd prefer things settle down naturally to allow that new housing stock and decreased population to work their magic. So far, though, it's not working, which begs the question, how much longer will Dr. Lowe tolerate price gains of the magnitude we've just experienced? How many years will it go on? So the solutions, and this is what Ian's putting forward in his article. What can regulators do? For those in the know, they're called macro-prudential controls. Essentially, they're tools that limit the extent to which banks can lend. We're seeing that start to manifest in New Zealand, guys, where the government is just limiting. Instead of a 10% deposit, you may be told you need a 20% or even more. See, here's the thing, guys. You're getting the banks giving some people 5% deposits, and they're guaranteeing it for them. Rather than borrowing 6 times your income, you may only be allowed to borrow triple your income. That's not a bad thing, is it? Either or both of these measures would restrict the amount you can borrow, and hence how much you can pay. For years, the RBA poo-pooed them. Interest rate charges, they argue, were the only real weapon when it came to property. 4 years ago, however, regulators unleashed controls on investors, and it worked. There you go. We're not in a free market, everyone. Don't kid yourself into thinking that what you're experiencing here, the life that you're living, that you're in a free market. You got all the interventionists, all the socialists who are going, oh, it's capitalism, it's resulting in this. No, we're not in a purely free market, everyone. We're in a highly regulated, highly manipulated market. People and companies can use and do use political leverage to destroy competition, limit opportunities, limit innovation, to protect their little empire. You've got interventions in the market that we're seeing that have, I would hope, unintended consequences for future generations, years after the people that implemented them are no longer in power. You've got people that are born into a world where they think these things are normal. We looked at an article of stamp duty where one couple were hoping for a discount or increase the first home buyer portion of it. And they didn't even think to question the reasoning behind it, or why is it so expensive? Why is this a method that we're choosing to fund the government? Why shouldn't there be other ways? So interest-only loans, the preferred vehicle for property investors, weren't exactly outlawed, but they were heavily restricted, forcing many investors out, settling the property market. Now, however, the RBA is facing a bleak choice. The higher housing prices grow, the greater the risk we could see a messy unwinding down the track. To stop the boom in its tracks now, or even slow it down, could unsettle confidence and derail the recovery. So what solution would I put forward? I would say we need to increase general financial literacy. I'm hoping I would like us to see freedom from debt and to promote individual responsibility and agency. That needs to be, you never see that in any of these articles. I mean, they just play the victim narrative over and over again. I'd argue we need to promote a wider understanding of Austrian economics and start at the Mises Institute, everyone. People need to realize, particularly when they're blaming, it's also the capitalists, it's this comrade, we all need to live in a shit little hovel, social housing all the way. No, you want individual responsibility, agency. You want to live in a society where you can be rewarded for your effort, your hard work, and your intelligence and skills. And I'm not saying it's going to be some dystopian world where, all the weaker people aren't taken care of. If anything, a more prosperous society where people are able to succeed, then there's more chance that people will be generous to those that need help rather than forcing them to give, stealing money off people and then giving it to others and considering that a good deed. So that is what I would suggest, everyone. What do you think? How many people have studied economics and never even heard of any of the Austrian schools? So thank you all very much for watching this episode of HeiseSays. Again, I'm going to give the new... Oh, that should be outro there. Anyway, I'm going to give the new standard a bit of time just to test it out this month. I won't be able to put as many videos out because understandably these take a little bit more time to put together and produce. Let me know how I'm going if you enjoy these videos in the comments below. It's a little bit more than just reading the article out. I like to pull them apart a little bit more. Links to all of the references are in the pinned comments below. If you are a fan of the channel and enjoy the content that I'm creating, there are a few ways you can support us. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links from Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or AussieBroadband. Every little bit helps. You can support us by buying our merch from HeiseSays. I have pocket squares for sale, or using Teespring to get the mugs and other little things. You can use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, support us via PayPal, use good old SelfWealth, or MeetRx as well. Thank you all very much, everyone. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.